I've been dreading to make this video, but it's got to happen, I suppose. Let's turn the camera on. Hello folks, JW Talks Motorsport here, and for the second year in a row, you get this glorious face. And, well, if I've got my face on, it means one thing, of course. I am here to do my reaction to the predictions I made for the 2025 Formula 1 season, the Drivers' Championship, the Constructors' Championship, and also the predictions I made for the 2026 driver lineup. I didn't make a video for that, but I did obviously make a graphic on the YouTube community tab, which is still on there, and I also put it on Twitter and even in the Discord chat that I'm in as well, and I think also a Facebook chat I'm in as well. I can't 100% remember. But, yeah, so we'll go through that after we go through these predictions. Now, I'm obviously not looking forward to this, as I mentioned earlier, because there was a lot on here that I think I've got wrong, and I'm probably going to end up getting cooked for it in the comments section. So, definitely looking forward to that, that's for sure. So, if you didn't see last year's one, which I'll put in the card on the top right, here's how the ground rules work. For every one that I get right, I give myself a 0. And for those that I get wrong, depending on how far I'm off, I give myself a plus however. So if they're 1 off from where I predicted them, +1. If I'm 2 off, +2. 3 off, +3, etc, etc. Regardless of whether it was places above or places below. So it basically works the same way as how people do their reactions to their Premier League predictions. So that's what we're going to do here, of course. Now there are 21 drivers to go through, because I did predict that one correct. And because every driver on here actually was on the final drivers classifications, I actually don't need to put any criteria in, I suppose, to counteract for any replacement drivers coming in, because I've got them all right. So without further ado then, let's get through this, because I'm not looking forward to this, guys. So let's get this show on the road. 21, and in this position I've sadly gone with Gabriel Bortoleto. Starting off a bit rough there. There is intrigue with the reigning Formula 2 champion, but the reason why I have put him in last is for 2 reasons. Number 1, he's driving a Sauber, which during testing has once again not set the world alight and is looking to be the slowest car on the grid again. And secondly, I'm not fully sold on this guy. Now look, I'm not saying he's a terrible driver, but apart from winning Formula 2 and Formula 3 back-to-back, his results outside of those 2 series aren't really anything to write home about. And given he won the Formula 3 title with a Trident, which was known for being a rocket ship during the previous spec of F3 cars, combined with the fact that Formula 2 is a f***ing mess right now, as I covered in a video I made last year, it's hard for me to gauge where he is compared to the rest of the field, and it won't be helped by the fact that he is driving a Sauber this year. Now, look, I do hope Gabriel is able to we all thought Sauber were going to be crap,
and he's able to prove a lot of people wrong. But as of right now, I can't see him beating his teammate, nor can I see him finishing anywhere higher than last, even with one of the drivers not doing a full season.
Yeah, I got that one a bit wrong there, didn't I? Now, as I mentioned there, I did have my reasons for putting him in last. And yes, I am aware that he won F2 and F3 back-to-back, but as I mentioned there, F2 and F3 are a mess of a championship, and if you saw Gabriel's results before he got to Formula 3 and Formula 2, they weren't really anything to write home about. But, to give him his credit, he has actually proved me wrong this year. Now, look, where he finished in the Drivers' Championship, I don't think is a true reflection of how his season has gone. Because personally speaking, I think he's actually done a decent job this year as Gabby. Now, don't get me wrong, I don't think he's going to be a trendsetter at all. I don't think he's going to be one to look out for in the future in terms of challenging for a World Championship. But I do think he is a solid midfield driver, like his teammate Nico Hülkenberg is. And that, for me, is not a bad thing to have attached next to you. For me, that's good enough to be on the F1 grid. If you're able to do a job in the team that you're at, and you're able to do that job fine, or good I should say, brilliantly, then you deserve to be on the grid in my books. Simple as that. So I put him in 21st. He actually, in the end, finished in 19th in the championship. So, in actual fact, it's not too bad, but I actually kind of predicted him horribly, because I think he actually scored 19 points in the end. He actually did score quite a few points in the end. So, -2 to kick things off. But yeah, definitely proved me wrong, and I look forward to seeing what he could do at Audi next year, considering it seems that Audi don't actually sound too bad now. It seems that I've heard recently they're actually ahead of schedule when it comes to their 2026 car. Hopefully next year is also going to be a decent year for Bortoleto. Maybe he could actually get on terms with Hulkenberg and maybe actually beat him in the championship. Who knows? Moving on.
And sticking with the subject of being cruel, I've put Jack Doohan. Now hang on, hear me out. Yes, I am well aware that Alpine looked very good during pre-season testing. However, with Jack, there are two reasons why I have put him down here. Number one, and like with a lot of people, I don't actually rate the guy, and I generally think he'll be ran circles this year by Pierre Gasly.
Don't think we ever got to see it.
But secondly, and most importantly, I don't think he will be in that seat for very long.
I was right.
Hence why there are 21 spaces on my graphic rather than 20. With little options left on the table, Alpine ended up promoting Jack Doohan to the race seat, who, since the second half of 2022, following the Oscar Piastri contract saga, was the team's reserve driver, and to his credit, has been waiting for a drive in F1 for quite a while,
He did, to be fair.
ever since finishing third in the Formula 2 Championship in 2023. It's rumoured that Jack has a 5 to 6 race contract with Alpine, which would take him to either Jeddah or Miami. And even though it is rumoured that he has a performance clause on his contract, I honestly don't think it's going to matter whether he does well or not in these first few races, as in my opinion, I think Alpine have already made their minds up, particularly Flavio Briatore. Now whilst I don't rate the guy, as mentioned earlier, I do feel that he is being treated unfairly.
Yeah,
here,
I still maintain that now, and I think
he's not being given a fair chance to prove himself. However, at the same time, I don't think in the limited amount of races he's rumoured to have that he will set the world alight, and I do honestly believe he is going to drown, judging from his results he got before he got to F3
bit like Gabriel
and
Bortoleto,
F2,
but I would say slightly worse than results before he got to F3 and F2.
Now, I'm not going to bash him too hard about his race, as to give him the benefit of the doubt, Alpine did mess up his strategy, but judging from his qualifying pace, it's not a very good look in my opinion, and I do believe as a result, he will not score a point during the 5 or 6 races.
And he didn't. I was right with that.
That being said, I do think he will do enough to just beat Bortoleto on a countback due to the fact that Gabriel is driving a Sauber.
We really weren't aware of how good Sauber were this year.
Cool, but that's why I put Doohan in P20. I was tempted to put him in last, but judging from Alpine's pace they've shown,
I should have really gone with my gut.
I don't think that.
I should have gone with my gut. I really should have gone with my gut there, shouldn't I? Because I put him in 20th. I was actually being quite generous there. He did actually finish last. He finished 21st out of 21 drivers. But, yeah, poor Jack. I don't think we really got to see what he was capable of against Pierre Gasly. I think overall in the 6 races he did, which I did predict correct, by the way, Gasly was better. But I don't think Doohan was that bad in the car. But overall, it wasn't that good, was it? It wasn't that bad, but it wasn't anything special. And I do think he was treated poorly. I mean, I don't know if you've seen any footage from the Super Formula test recently. For 3 days straight, he's crashed at the same corner. He's clearly still carrying the mental burden that was Alpine, really, and Flavio Briatore. I do hope he can overcome that soon, and I can hope for his sake he can have a decent racing career afterwards. But yeah, it's safe to say that this time at Alpine has really not fonded him very well, I suppose. Because, yeah, he was treated very horribly. As much as I never really rated the guy, and I still don't, he was treated poorly, and he wasn't really given a chance to prove people wrong, really, unlike Gabriel Bortoleto. So, yeah, obviously I was correct with him being dropped after 6 races. He was replaced by Franco Colapinto, and we'll get onto him a little bit later, because I've predicted him horribly in this prediction as well. So, yeah, moving on.
P19, and next on this list, I've put Nico Hulkenberg. Oh, Nico, why did you decide to leave Haas?
Oh, I got this one horribly wrong, didn't I?
The reason why Nico decided to return to Sauber is because of the team becoming Audi next year. However, given it's been reported that the development
news has
of
got a
Audi
bit better for Audi since,
great, combined with the fact that Sauber appeared to have the worst car again this year, I honestly think Nico is in for a tough ride.
He wasn't.
And although I believe he will beat Bortoletto this year, given his experience, I do sadly believe he will finish low down in the table. Now, I am well aware that I predicted this last year for Nico,
and you shouldn't have gone with that. You shouldn't have gone with that, JW.
However, I'm more confident that this will sadly be the case, as Sauber have shown no sign of progressing anytime soon. Watch this backfire in my face.
Well, it did. It did. It horribly did. And it so backfired in my face that Nico finally got his first ever podium this year. And I was at that Grand Prix when it happened. I seem to carry some kind of good luck charm when I go to Silverstone since 2022. I've witnessed Carlos Sainz take his first ever win. I've seen Lewis Hamilton end his victory drought. And I've also witnessed Nico Hülkenberg finally get his first ever podium. And I was also there to witness McLaren's turnaround, I suppose, in 2023. So I guess I'm a bit of a good luck charm when I go to Silverstone. I don't know what lucky charms I'll bring when I go to Silverstone next year. Who knows, really. But Nico, what a year he's had. Obviously, it kind of petered off a little bit for Sauber towards the end, which is why they ended up finishing in the position they did in the Constructors, which I really don't think is a reflection, because Sauber have exceeded everybody's expectations this year. And Hülkenberg, again, another great year for him in a season where we thought he was actually going to finish quite low because we didn't have that much expectations for Sauber, but they proved us wrong, that's for sure. So much so that Hülkenberg actually finished 11th in the championship, so I was 8 off. So I've gone from being on -3 now to being on -11, so that's a massive jump. Hülkenberg and Magnussen were the ones that gave me that huge jump last year, and well, Hülkenberg's given me another big jump this year. So yeah, a good year for Sauber. A brilliant way to end off their final year being known as Sauber, of course, because they are going to be known as Audi next year. And it does seem like progress is actually coming good for them now. So I do look forward to seeing what both Nico and Gabby can do at Audi next year. Let's move on to 18th, shall we? Hopefully this one's a bit better.
We have P18, and in this position, I've put Lance Stroll. Oh dear, Aston, what have you done? Just like with their livery this year, they've also managed to botch their performance, as whilst they don't have the worst car on paper, they do appear to have the second worst, which ain't too much of a surprise given how much they dropped off towards the back end of last year. And
to be fair, they didn't have the second worst car. I mean,
all their eggs towards 2026,
where I predicted them in the Constructors, they were very close to doing that, but
and the first Aston
they weren't that bad, Aston, this year.
Now, I do expect Aston
but in the case of Lance Stroll,
like we saw with Alpine last year, as the season goes by, but I'm not expecting a huge improvement, especially with them focusing on 2026. And as for Lance Stroll, I can't see him getting anywhere higher than 18th, as I expect Lance to once again have a dreadful season, where inconsistency will once again creep in his
It's
driving.
just the same old story with Lance.
Will this be his last year with the team, especially with the Sonoda
rumours
running
it isn't.
around?
He's still going to be at Aston next year. I pointed it out in the comments section of this video, but notice the spelling error for Aramco. Yeah, I did that also for Fernando Alonso as well. I was typing a little bit too quickly there. But Aston actually weren't too bad from what I thought. They did look terrible in testing, but in actual fact, they kind of continued where they left off from the end of last year, where they were kind of firmly in the midfield, and they were fighting in the midfield this year, to be honest. But in the case of Lance Stroll, it was another terrible year. I felt like I was repeating off a broken record here, but yeah, it just wasn't anything to write home about. I put him in 18th, and in the end, because Aston were actually a lot better than I thought, he actually did finish 16th, but when you compare him to where his teammate finished in the championship, and considering the job he was doing again against Lance, yeah, not really anything to write home about, really. I do look forward to what Aston can do, though, next year, though, with the Honda engine. I am hearing good things about it, but I do think Lance is going to hold him back a little bit next year. Will next year be his last year in F1? Again, I don't know at this point. But yeah, another terrible year. So I was 2 off in the end, so I'm now on -13. So yeah, we'll move on to 17th.
This one was a really tough one to call, especially with how close the midfield looked during testing.
I think I've got a bad feeling about...
No. Yeah,
no,
sounds really
no,
cruel,
no.
but given how close it is, someone had to get the wooden spoon out of that big group.
Oh, Joe.
Isaac, like with other drivers on the grid, will be making his debut this year in F1.
Alright, let's hear
with
my
him
explanation.
driving for Racing Bulls. Isaac does have a lot of potential, especially given what he was able to do in a handicapped Campos in F2
He really did well in
year.
Formula 2, to be fair.
However, with him having a reputation of being quite erratic, and also having a temper over the radio.
He did
like
still
a certain Yuki
possess
Tsunoda
that.
did
He
during
still
his
did
first year
possess
in
that.
F1. I am expecting it to be a learning year for him. And with how close the midfield is, I expect him to be quite low down in the championship.
No.
Unless Helmut Marko does a driver switch mid-season.
Well, he did.
But honestly, I can't see that happening.
No, J-Dub.
On to P60.
Oh, God. That sounded worse. There was a driver swap. It just wasn't with Isaac Hadjar, though. It was with Yuki Tsunoda. How horribly wrong I got that for Liam Lawson. 2 races, man. 17th, man. Where did he finish in the end? 12th. So 5 off in the end, so I'm now on minus 18 now. Oh, God. Right. Isaac, what have I got to say about him? Rookie of the year in my book. Simply. After Yuki Tsunoda got the promotion, or demotion, however you want to call it, to Red Bull, my God, has this guy been amazing this year. He got his first ever podium this year as well at Zandvoort, let's not forget. Yes, he got lucky with Lando Norris's engine failure, but he was there to capitalise. He was so strong that weekend that he deserved a podium, really. Yeah, an amazing rookie year for Isaac. Definitely better than Kimi and Ollie this year. Ollie also had his moments, as did Kimi, but Isaac has just been consistent throughout this year. And my God, is he one to look out for in the future. He's obviously got the promotion to Red Bull, which may sound like a downgrade, but given that we've got a new regulation set coming next year, and we've also got the whole factor of whether Max Verstappen will stay or leave Red Bull at the end of 26, especially with certain factors that have come about, including Helmut Marko leaving the team after this calendar year. Maybe Isaac being promoted might come at a right time for him, but we'll have to wait and see on that, of course. But Isaac, props to him, rookie of the year in my book, and yeah, I cannot wait to see what he can do at Red Bull next year. Hopefully he doesn't have the second driver curse. Of course, there is that worry in the back of my head, but I think he has got a very good future in Formula 1, that is for sure. Let's move on to 16th, which I've got a bad feeling about that one as well.
Now, and sadly in this position, I put Fernando Alonso. Oh, Fernando, what have you done to deserve this? Yeah,
God.
as mentioned earlier, it ain't looking good for Aston Martin.
It really wasn't that bad in the end for Aston, was it?
Grid. And whilst I don't doubt for 1 minute that Fernando will be able to drag the Aston during the season,
well, he was piggybacking them a little bit.
Anywhere higher than 16th, given Aston are clearly focusing more on 2026, which it's safe to say could be make or break for Fernando in terms of whether he stays on
that's
for
still
a
question,
or whether he decides to call it a day, especially with the Max Verstappen rumours lingering
I don't
around.
I don't think that's happening now.
It's probably going to be a long and tough year for Fernando, it must be said.
I mean, it started off quite poorly for Fernando, didn't he? Because he made that uncharacteristic error in Australia. But I think it's been another solid year for Fernando, really, considering the equipment he was to deal with. So much so that I've got this horribly wrong, of course. I don't even need to look, because he finished 10th in the championship. He managed to get the Aston in the top 10 in the Drivers' Championship. So I've got that one horribly wrong, that's for sure. So 6 off. I think I'm now on, what, minus 24 now? But yeah, a good year for Fernando, it must be said. Aston weren't actually too bad this year. They kind of, as mentioned, left off from where they were from the second half of last year, where they were fighting in the midfield, and they kind of maintained that throughout the year. There were, of course, times where the Aston looked like complete ass, it must be said. The moaning Yorkshireman calls them Aston farting. They were at times this year, but weren't continuously this year, it must be said. Fernando's done a really good job to get that car in the top 10, it must be said. As mentioned, it will be make or break for him, although he has kind of changed his terms a little bit, which my own brother is raising an eyebrow a little bit because he's not fully convinced on it, because he said if the car performs well, he will retire. If the car doesn't perform well, then he will continue for at least another year. We'll see if he actually sticks to his word about that, because if Aston actually do have a good car, then maybe he will retire, but we'll have to wait and see. It is obviously his call at the end of the day, but of course we do have the Charles Leclerc rumours now rooming around for Aston Martin. They've kind of replaced the Max Verstappen rumours, so we'll wait and see what happens with Fernando. Will he stay on to potentially be Leclerc's teammate if that rumour ends up being true? Who knows, really. But yeah, good year for Fernando, and we'll see what he can do next year. Will it be his last year? Will he retire after 2026? Who knows?
P15, I've got Alexander Albon.
Oh no, not another one.
Alex getting beaten by
3 horrible ones in a row here.
What? Okay, that sounded cringe.
Yeah.
Yes, I do generally think that Alex will get beaten this year, and to be
No,
honest,
he didn't. He didn't.
Since the second half of last year. Whilst Alex won't have Franco as a teammate this time, he will have Carlos Sainz, who, during his time at Ferrari, proved himself to be a solid front runner.
Well,
And with the pace he showed in testing, it's plausible that Carlos could run circles around him.
he didn't.
And it's plausible that Alex, judging from the competition around him, could end up having a tough year.
He didn't.
Now, look, do I believe he will drown like Logan Sargent and Nicholas Latifi?
He didn't drown
did
at all,
before
to be
him?
honest.
No, absolutely not. Now, do I believe that Alex will get the boot after this year if he doesn't perform?
I don't think he's getting the boot
Honestly,
at all,
I
to be
don't
honest.
know. But it's safe to
No,
say
he didn't get the boot.
does
He
have a
doesn't
lot
have
of
the boot.
pressure on his shoulders this year.
God, that was a horrible one. I think we all had this thought that Albon was going to drown this year because of what happened with Colapinto at the end of 2024. And we thought that because Carlos Sainz was coming in, he was going to run circles. Well, that didn't happen because Albon actually beat Sainz in the championship. And he was actually very good this year, was Albon. He really was. Don't get me wrong, it kind of petered off a little bit towards the end with Alex. And I think that is something he does need to work on because he had that in 2024 as well. Kind of similar to Oscar Piastri in a way. So that's something he does need to work on. But I think if you look at his season overall, he has had a really, really good year and has been a really key part in Williams finishing up in 5th in the Constructors' Championship. Overall did a better season than his teammate. Don't get me wrong, Carlos, I think towards the end of the year was starting to beat him more regularly. But if you take the season as a product overall, I think Alex had the better year, to be honest. So he definitely proved us wrong. I put him in 15th. He finished in 8th in the championship. 7 off. So I think we're now on minus 31 as a result. So I think I am going to do worse than last season at this rate. So yeah, let's see if these end up being better.
So moving on to P14, and in this position, I put Franco.
Oh no.
Why is he on this list? He's not assigned to any team, so why is he randomly on this list? I mean, there's the whole thing with doing, but
I'm doing this a lot in this video.
Yeah, this makes sense now.
Right, let me listen to myself.
It's pretty much obvious at this point that along with Doing getting the boot after a few races, Colapinto will come in as his replacement.
And he did.
It's very obvious that Flavio has made him his new chosen one, like Michael Schumacher back in the mid-90s.
Has he though?
And Fernando
Has
Alonso
he
in
though?
the mid-2000s.
He is the chosen one. You must see it.
Yeah, I had to put that scene in from Star Wars. Given the performances that Franco was able to deliver straight away when he was thrown in at the deep end at Williams, it's no surprise that this guy is getting a lot of hype. And it does make me wonder.
I think it's kind of
why
cooled
Alpine
off a
didn't
little
wait
bit.
a little longer to sign
to be
Franco
honest.
if they didn't have Jack in their plans. It's a mess they could have easily have avoided.
And I still
But
maintain
either
that
way, I
if they
expect
really
Franco
wanted
to make his
Franco,
Alpine
they should have had him
debut
from the
at
beginning,
either
and he would have had a
Miami or
pre-season
Imola.
under his
And
belt.
when he does, I expect him to be on the pace straight away, as I
No.
believe he will get a load
No.
of free practice sessions between
He
now
didn't.
and
He
whenever
didn't.
he
He
replaces
didn't.
Jack
He only had a
to
couple.
get
He only
himself
had
ready
like
to partner
one or two
alongside
tests.
Gasly.
Not really
Now, I don't
representative
expect him
pace.
to beat Gasly in the standings,
He
as
didn't.
Gasly is obviously going to have a head start on him in the championship. But
I think
once
overall
he's in the
Gasly
car,
was better than
I think
Colapinto this
14th
year,
will
to
be
be
the
honest.
maximum he can achieve. Either
Not
way,
by
he's
much
there
though,
for
and
the
I'll get
long
onto
run,
that in a minute.
and I am intrigued to see how the relationship unfolds, especially when Mercedes supply engines to them in 2026, which is an engine that Franco is familiar with, given his time at Williams. Only time will tell, I suppose.
Yeah, only
Next-
time will tell, I suppose, because Alpine were a bloody mess. Their car was not as good as everybody thought it to be. I say not as good, it was woeful. It was the worst car on the grid. I was basing this solely on the pace Alpine had from pre-season because they did look very good. But it seems to me that Alpine have this Haas issue where they're good in qualifying, as we saw with Pierre Gasly a few times this year, but in the race, they are just horrid. They just fall off a cliff. Now, with Franco, it's not been a good year. I put him in 14th, he finished in 20th, and he got no points to his name as a result. Yeah, it was not a good year for Franco, was it? Personally speaking, I don't think he's as bad as everybody makes him out to be. And the reason why I say that is because if you look at his pace compared to Pierre in the second half of the season, his race pace, to be exact, not his qualifying pace. His qualifying pace he definitely needs to work on, does Franco. His race pace, though, I think he was actually on par with Gasly, to be honest. I mean, you saw it at Kota. That was the only time, really, where we got to see that showcase. But the reason why that's not really being brought up is because of how bad Alpine were this year, to the point where we barely saw them. Yeah, Colapinto, he never really got the credit that he really deserved it, I think. Don't get me wrong, there are elements he does need to work on himself, but I think that now he's going to have a pre-season under his belt and Alpine are going to switch to Mercedes. Hopefully Colapinto actually kicks on and actually starts to put in performances that we know he's capable of doing. I mean, he showed it in the Williams, for goodness sake. You don't just all of a sudden lose it because you're in a crap car. He was on par with Gasly in race pace. His qualifying, Gasly had his number on that, but race pace, I think they were similar to each other, it must be said. I mean, you just have to look at the second half of the season, really, to see that. Well, any footage you can find, because Alpine were pretty much invisible this year. That's all I've got to say with Colapinto. It was a bad prediction on me, but that was mainly because I thought that Alpine would actually do a lot better than they did when they didn't. And their final year with Renault has ended up being a sour note, really, finishing last in the Constructors. It gives them more development time, I suppose, but yeah, not really anything to write home about, really. And organisationally, the team is a dump anyway. Even if they do improve next year, organisationally, they'll end up being the weaker Mercedes-powered team by a country mile, I would think. Moving on to 13th.
Up in the unlucky position of 13th, I put the Red Bull reserve driver.
And this is where it goes wrong.
Well, I guess it's one way of giving him a Red Bull drive, even if he's not actually racing for them.
Well,
unless something happens to Max or Liam during the season.
The latter.
It's very obvious that Yuki is entering what is more than likely his final year with the Red Bull sister team, and even Red Bull as a whole. As with them splitting
half and half
Honda
right
after
there,
this year,
I think.
and with Yuki's connections with the Japanese manufacturer, he will probably be saying sayonara to the brand, but hopefully not from Formula 1. Here's hoping he gets the Aston drive next year, but I'm not holding my breath. With it being his final year with them, I'm expecting him to have a no bull attitude, with him putting in some stellar
I think he could have done if he was still at Racing Bulls.
To send Red Bull a message that they should have promoted him when they had the chance.
Probably not wise in the end
with
to
it
promote
like
him, to
that
be honest.
Racing Bulls have the 8th quickest car on the grid, being behind Haas, Alpine and even Williams, I'm expecting him to drag that car to at least 13th in the standing, with him running circles around
No, he
Hadjar
didn't.
on the basis that he is more experienced than the young Frenchman, because hashtag justice for Yuki.
Yeah, justice for Yuki,
Next
I suppose still. Although I do maintain that I think Liam deserved another crack at Racing Bulls. There are some people who think he deserved the chop because of the season he had, but I think he deserves another crack at it, given he didn't really have a full year with Racing Bulls. And I do think he's still got something to show as Liam. I think he still has the pace needed, but I think he just needs to tidy up his aggression. But yeah, Yuki, we never really got to see what he was capable of because he got promoted to Red Bull. Now look, I was clamouring for him to get promoted to Red Bull, and I was happy he got the promotion, but in the end, really, it just became another second driver curse, really. And to be honest, I'd given up on rating anybody that goes to that seat, to be honest, because you can't. It's like with Formula 2 with the Mechachrome lottery, you can't really judge anyone because of the fact that that car is built solely around Max's driving style. Now yes, you could make the argument, well, the driver has to adapt to what he's been given, and whilst that's true to some degree, we've seen it with several drivers now who are of decent quality. You've had it with Checo, you've had it with Pierre, you've had it with Alex, you've had it with Yuki now. I would say Liam, but not to a degree, because he only really had 2 races in that car. You put any driver in that car, I think they are going to drown, because that car is just built around Max Verstappen. Now look, maybe that will be different with the new regulations coming next year, and of course this whole factor of whether Verstappen will leave Red Bull or not after 26. But yeah, I basically gave up rating Tsunoda, to be honest, because I don't think we ever got to see what he's capable of, because the 2 races he had with Racing Bulls, he was brilliant. Don't get me wrong, the finishing positions don't really reflect that, but that was mainly because Racing Bulls were doing everything in their power to try and muck it up for Yuki, really, with the strategy. Yeah, I can't really judge Yuki this year, to be honest. He finished 17th in the end, so I'm 4 off there when it comes to predictions. It shows that these predictions have been a complete shambles. But yeah, poor Yuki. He's obviously not racing next year. He's going to be the Red Bull reserve. Obviously trying to keep his eye on if there's an opening for 2027, especially considering that 2027 could end up being the maddest silly season as a result. I hope he's back on the grid in 2027. It doesn't look like he's going to IndyCar now because of the fact he is going to be in the F1 paddock for basically all the season as a reserve driver for Red Bull. But yeah, I hope he's back on the grid for 2027, and I hope he gets out of that Red Bull system as soon as possible, because it seems that Honda have got no plans for him anymore, considering they've chose Jack Crawford to be the Aston Martin reserve driver. So hopefully Yuki's back on the grid in 2027. With whom, I'm not sure. Maybe McLaren, maybe Haas, especially if Oscar leaves, and especially if Haas decide not to renew Esteban Ocon after next year. Yeah, we'll see what happens. Moving on.
We arrive at the first of the 2 Haases, as in P12 we have Esteban Ocon. Ocon, after being thrown under the bus by Alpine last year, is entering his first year with Haas, with it being the first time in his career that he's being powered by a Ferrari engine. Sounds similar to someone else is having the same experience
I
this
think
year.
one had a better experience than the
Ocon
other,
is
to be
joining
fair.
the team at the right time, as Haas have come off the back of an amazing 2024 season. Whilst Haas seem to be behind Alpine and Williams, judging from testing, I do expect
were behind
them to
Williams.
be in the mix when it comes to the sharp
They
end
were
of
in the sharp
midfield.
end of the
And I
midfield, to be
expect
fair.
Ocon to have a strong season, now that he is not being held back by old car park.
To
But
a
in
degree, he
time,
did.
He will just get beaten by his teammate.
Ocon, yeah. I expected a little bit better from him, but I don't think he's been too bad, to say the least. I think he has got some good results in that car. Yeah, I think he's had a decent first year with Haas, but whether he stays on with them beyond 2026 is another question, especially, as mentioned earlier, with Yuki Tsunoda looming around now looking for a job, especially now that their connections with Toyota have now increased because they now have title sponsorship from them in 2026. Which I honestly believe is going to lead to them potentially having Toyota engines in the future. Maybe even taken over by Toyota as a whole, of course. It seems that Toyota are really wanting to increase their interest in Formula 1 again. Hopefully they don't make the same muck-up that they did when they were previously in Formula 1 of doing things the Toyota way rather than the normal way of going about racing, if you get what I mean. Yeah, with Ocon, I put him in 12th. I think he actually finished lower than that in the end. He finished 15th, so 3 off in the end, so... In actual fact, he actually finished behind Liam Lawson in the championship, who actually had that mid-season swap, of course. Well, I say mid-season, beginning of the season swap, I should say. So I was 3 off in the end. I expected a little bit better from Ocon, but I don't think it was too bad in the end for him. But I think he does need to step it up next year, especially given the next guy we've got on the list definitely had his number at the end of the season.
Put Oliver Bearman. Ollie, it's safe to say, in the few races he did last year, made an impression on a lot of fans.
And I
with
think
him
he still
coping
did
well
this
in
year.
his first ever race, despite literally being thrown in at the deep end at Ferrari, following Carlos Sainz's appendicitis. Ollie then did 2 races for Haas, replacing Kevin Magnussen for 2 different reasons, and apart from Interlagos, where he seemed to struggle in wet conditions, he once again made an impression, grabbing a points finish at Baku, and also in both races, being able to out-qualify Nico Hülkenberg.
Yeah,
who
I
had
remember
more
at the time
experience
saying
in the car
Behrman
than
should
he
probably
did.
get the seat for the remainder of the season,
Ollie
to
is
be honest,
entering
because
his first
Magnussen
full
wasn't going to
season
be
in
with the team
F1,
next
and I
year, so
expect it to be a
you might
very
as well have
strong
cut your losses
season,
and put
to the point
Behrman
where
in the
he is
car
able
for the
to
remainder
beat
of the
his new
season,
teammate,
especially
Esteban
given how much
Ocon
of a
in
mess
standings.
F2 is.
Now granted, I don't expect him to beat Ocon straight away, given Ocon has more experience than him, but as the season progresses, I expect him
I
to
think
have
I
the
was
edge
right
on
with
him,
this, to be
which
honest.
in turn will see him just edge Esteban in the standings. One thing's for sure though, I expect it to be very close between the two teammates. Let's just hope for Ocon's
I
sake
guess it
doesn't
was,
end
but
the
I think
same way as it did with Checo, Fernando and Pierre, even though I believe with 2 of those teammates, it wasn't fully
and I don't
on
think
him.
he really fell out with Ollie this year.
We now
so
arrive at the top.
yeah, I don't think Esteban even fell out with Ollie this year. I think they only had 1 piece of contact this year, which was at Silverstone, and I even got to see that because I was sitting in between Luffield and Woodcote, so I got a good view of that contact, to be fair. But that one wasn't on Ocon, to be fair. That was actually on Behrman. But I did get it right in that I believed that Ocon would have the edge on Behrman to start with. He did. And as the season went on, Behrman definitely had Ocon's number. And so much so that I believed he would beat him in the championship. And he did. I predicted him in 11th. He ended up finishing 13th in the end, did Behrman, so I was 2 off. But to say that I made the prediction that Behrman would actually have his number towards the end of the year, I guess I was really right on that one. I just didn't get the position correct, though. Yeah, but overall, a pretty good year for Ollie. Not my rookie of the year, but he's definitely a tight second with Kimi Antonelli, I would say. Maybe slightly higher than Kimi, but yeah, overall, pretty good year for Ollie, and he's definitely a shoo-in for Ferrari in the future, that is for sure, especially if Lewis Hamilton decides to retire after next year, which I'm definitely leaning towards. We'll get to that in a minute, but Behrman has definitely got a strong future in Formula 1, that's for sure. Let's get on to the top 10 now, shall we?
And to kick off the second half of the standings, I've got Carlos Sainz down as finishing 10th. Wait, are Williams in the top 10? Have you gone mental, JW?
No, made
No,
that
I
2
haven't,
Williams
but
is in
thanks
the
for your
top 10,
concern.
actually.
It's safe to say during testing that Williams have looked very impressive and looked to be in the fight for the best of the rest title.
And I think they
particularly
were
in the hands
best
of
of the,
Carlos
and they were
Sainz,
best of the rest
who,
this year.
like with many people, I
By a
believe
country
will beat
mile.
his teammate Alex Albon by quite a comfortable margin.
No.
Judging from how Alex coped
No, I
when
got
he had
this bit
Colin
though
Pinto
wrong
as
with
his
Sainz.
teammate. But the question I think everyone will be curious to know is whether Carlos can achieve a podium with Williams. Personally speaking, I don't think he will, as I think he will need a lot of luck to go his way for that to be a reality. But that being said, I do expect him to be a consistent points challenger now that Williams finally have sufficient funding due to them finally having a title sponsor.
Things are looking...
Who knows what 2026 will have in store for
Things
the
are looking up for them
team.
for that. I honestly can't wait to see what they can do, to be honest, especially with the Mercedes engine they've got, which is rumoured to have the best engine next year. But in terms of Carlos's season, how do we rate it? Well, he finished 9th in the championship, so I was one off in the end. But we expected him to beat Alex this year, and he didn't. Because, truth be told, first half of the year for Carlos, yeah, it wasn't a very good first half of the year, was it? He was really underperforming in that Williams. Considering the pace he showed in pre-season testing with that car, I expected a lot more from him. Thankfully, though, the second half of the season, things started to click for Carlos, so much so that he ended up getting 2 podiums for Williams. One at Baku, which he thoroughly deserved after that qualifying session he had, where he got the car on the front row, just missing out on pole position, and then got a podium at Qatar when McLaren messed up their strategy. He was there to capitalise, and yeah, he was the one that got the only 2 podiums for Williams this year. So whilst Albon did overall have the better year than Carlos did actually get the 2 podiums for Williams and Alex didn't. So at the end of the season, you'd safe to say that as the year went on, the pendulum actually swung in Sainz's direction. That could be a sign of things to come next season. I expect it to be pretty close still between them next season, because it seems to me that Albon only seems to tail off when the season comes to a close, but for most of the season he's on it. Especially given everything looks positive for Williams next year, I am really expecting strong things for them next year. I think James Vowles, you've got to give him credit, he has definitely turned that team around, that is for sure, and Williams definitely looked to be on the up, which as somebody who's grown up watching Formula 1 for many years and seeing Williams being a front runner, really great to see. I even said that with McLaren as well, I think in this video as well. But one off for Carlos, so not a too bad prediction. Kind of gets away from most of the bad lot I did in the second half of the table there. So anyway, let's get back down to earth, because the next one I am dreading to look at.
Rest of the rest title, as I believe the top 8 will be occupied by the top 4 teams again, and in P9 I've put Pierre Gasly.
Oh no,
Alpine have looked very good in pre-season testing, it must be said,
they had wool
which is
over
a change,
our eyes.
considering things seem to always go wrong for them.
They still did.
It really does feel like Alpine want to end Renault's final year in F1 with a bang, and I don't mean the engine this time. Themselves and
cooked
Williams
for this
have
one,
definitely
aren't I?
caught people's attention during testing, and especially in the hands of Pierre Gasly, I can definitely see him doing a similar job to what Carlos Sainz may do at Williams, judging from the performances
only in
he put
qualifying
towards
he
the end
was
of last
he was a
year,
monster.
which was enough to
In the
back him
race, the
10th in
Alpine was
championship.
yeah.
It will be interesting to see, though, how he copes in future years with Alpine, especially with Franco Colapinto on the radar.
Future years, that's a question mark. Oh god, that is a horrible one. We all really thought Alpine was going to do well this year, especially considering the pace they showed in pre-season testing. They ended up having the worst car on the grid come the end of the season, to the point where they finished last in the Constructors. And as a result, it affected Pierre Gasly's finishing position. I predicted him in 9th, double that, 18th. What a horrible year for Alpine. Oh, that is a terrible prediction for me. Why did I get... I've been fooled by Alpine before in the past with pre-season. Why did I get fooled again? I should really have low faith for them when it comes to next year's pre-season test, and then maybe they'll do well. I mean, they've got Mercedes coming next year, so you'd think in theory Alpine will do better, and I think they should, but operationally they're going to get held back from actually reaching their true potential, because operationally the team is an absolute mess. Arguably worse than Ferrari. I think even Pierre's getting frustrated with the team, isn't he? I mean, he signed a multi-year deal middle of this year, but he regrets that now. I think he has got a release clause in his contract, which I hope he does take up maybe, because if Oscar Piastri decides to leave McLaren, that there is an opening maybe to be Lando's teammate at McLaren and potentially be a number 2 to him, and a proper number 2, unlike what he was with Max Verstappen because of the second driver curse at Red Bull. That's probably the only way I can see Pierre getting out, and I think if an opening comes out at McLaren, and considering the connection that both teams will have next year and that they're both going to be powered by Mercedes next year, yeah, I hope for Pierre's sake he takes that option. I mean, I've also seen Gabriel Bortoletto's name linked with that seat as well, but I personally don't see it. Especially if Audi do well next year, I think he'd want to stay there personally. But yeah, that's kind of that really. What a poor season for Alpine, and a really horrible prediction from me for Pierre Gasly. And the next one's not going to get even better.
P8, and once again going back to the word cruel, I put Liam Lawson. Yeah, I sadly see another second driver curse at Red Bull,
yeah.
this time involving poor Liam, who, it's safe to say, has been getting a lot of unnecessary hate from fans who wanted Yuki in the seat or were salty that he booted Checo and Daniel out respectively.
He's still getting hate
After
now,
only
but for a
11
different
races
reason.
in F1, clearly showing Helmut Marko has not learned anything from the previous time he did
And
this.
still hasn't.
Hello, Alex Albon.
That's why he's
Liam, for
probably...
his first full
Which now that
season,
he's gone,
has
I
been
hope now
thrown in at the
changes.
deep end at Red Bull to partner alongside arguably the best driver in the world, Max Verstappen.
Still is.
That being said though, although I feel he will finish down in 8th, I don't believe he will be as bad as Checo, as throughout testing, apart from a spin he had on day 1, it does appear that he's a bit more comfortable in the car than what Checo was,
you again.
and I do believe he will be a bit closer to everyone else in the top 14 battle, even if he does end up taking the wooden spoon in the end.
Nowhere near.
And personally speaking, I don't believe he will get demoted during the season, like some people believe he will, as I do see him being part of Red Bull's future, especially if Verstappen decides to leave the team after 2026, given the rumours linking him with a move to Aston in the future.
Not going to get demoted. 2 races in, mate. Why did I say that? Yeah, the 2 races he had with Red Bull were horrid. Never got out of Q1 and just struggled in the races. He really did not gel with that car at all, and Red Bull were basically back to square one when it came to finding someone who could cope with that car, which they had with Sergio Perez, but then when they catered more towards Max again, he struggled too. I think we do owe Sergio an apology, really, to be honest, because clearly he was able to do whatever he could with that car a lot better than what Liam and Yuki could. But yeah, he got demoted in the end to Racing Bulls, and he was quite shaky in that, to be honest, as well. I think second half of the year, I think he was a lot better, because from Austria he did score more points than Hadjar. Granted, there were circumstances. Hadjar did have issues on his end which allowed for that to happen, but he still collected the points when necessary for Racing Bulls. So I don't think he's as bad as everybody makes him out to be, and I do think he deserves another chance at Racing Bulls, which thankfully he has got, as he will be partnering with Arvid Lindblad next year at Racing Bulls. Whether he's still there after 26 is another question, and I think that will all really come down to whether Max Verstappen leaves the team or not. If Max does leave, then Liam will stay at Racing Bulls, because I think they'll want an experienced driver alongside whoever they promote, which won't be Alex Dunn anymore, because it looks like he's going to Alpine. They'll probably end up going with maybe Nikola Zoloff, I think is the rumour I've seen, who is a decent driver, to be fair to him, but I think like with Gabriel, I don't think he'll set the world alight personally. Whether Liam will be his teammate, I think will really depend on whether Max stays at the team or not. If Max ends up staying at the team, then Liam is not going to be at Racing Bulls, because they'll end up with a Lindblad Zoloff partnership. I nearly forgot his name there. But yeah, that's how I see it, I'm afraid. Anyway, let's move on to P7.
In P7, I put Andrea Kimi Antonelli.
Got one right!
God, I am hyped for this guy, I can't lie. Safe to say there hasn't been this much hype for a rookie in F1 since Charles Leclerc in 2018, with his junior Formula result speaking for itself, if we ignore the Mechachrome lottery from last year.
And we
Mercedes
still are.
clearly had big things for him, even going as far as to make him skip F3 and also have him make his debut with a top team. But whether it ends up being a Lewis Hamilton-like debut season or ends up being a massive flop remains to be seen.
I'd say it was in the middle.
I think it will be a mix of the two. For starters,
exactly.
I can see him having a good season, with him potentially being an outsider for a win in his rookie year. However, at the same time, I can also see his
he never came close to winning a race. Only sprint wins. He came close to getting a sprint win, but not a main win.
And
as we know, sprint races don't count towards
especially
statistics.
during a weekend where Mercedes look strong, given I see the team being inconsistent again, like they have been in previous years. This also
to a degree, but not as much as previous years. Andrea Kimi Antonelli, I got this one correct. He finished in P7 in the end. And yeah, I got that right. He could have got P6 had he not messed up his Abu Dhabi weekend, which allowed Lewis to just beat him in the end to P6 in the championship. But in terms of his season, it was a mixed bag. It started off well for him. I mean, he had that incredible drive at Melbourne when he had that difficult qualifying session, got his way back up to 4th in wet conditions, and had some pretty good races here and there as well, especially the podium he got at Montreal and even the sprint pole that he got in Miami. But then the middle of the season, he had a run of races where he didn't score points, and it was very clear his inexperience was getting the better of him. But as the year went on, he got better. He got 2 podiums in Sao Paulo and Las Vegas. Las Vegas was on a technicality because of McLaren's double disqualification, of course, but he was there to capitalise, even with the 5-second penalty that he got. Overall, his end of the season, apart from Abu Dhabi, was pretty good, and I am looking forward to seeing what he can do, especially given it's rumoured that Mercedes may potentially have the best car next year with that engine they've got. It could end up being a fight between Mercedes and McLaren next year if that is the case, and I think Mercedes have got the stronger lineup overall. I think Antonelli will go into next year, now that he's got a year under his belt, he'll erase the errors that he made this year and he'll crack on this year, maybe even challenge for a world championship. I think maybe George will do that personally because he's more experienced than Kimi, but I think he'll definitely be up there, and I still think he's one to watch out for in the future. So he's not my rookie of the year, that goes to Isaac Hadjar of course, but he's had a decent year. It was a bit of a mixed bag, but it definitely improved as the year went on. But I got the prediction right in terms of where he finished, so that's one, and I've got a feeling that's the only one I'm going to get in this one. Let's move on to P6.
Put George Russell.
Nope.
George of the Russell. Wait, I think somebody already says this. Anyways, George is entering
Interesting
this year
fact,
with a lot of expectations.
the moaning Yorkshireman has not brought me up about that.
Team,
he did not notice that. He didn't even mention it in our chat that we were in.
Last year, he
So
arguably had his best year at Mercedes.
maybe he notices now that I'm doing this video.
This year, however, he will have a new challenge on his hands in the form of Kimi Antonelli, who, as mentioned earlier, has a lot of hype surrounding him.
Kimi
Whilst
never
I
really
expect
threatened.
Russell to
Towards
beat
the end of
Kimi
the
in
year he
standings,
did.
thanks
Kimi
to him
did
having
it towards
more
the end of the year
experience
start
than
to
him. I
perform
do expect
slightly
Kimi to
better than
possibly give
George
him a
in
hard
some
time this
races,
year once the season
but
progresses,
overall
and
he
Kimi
never really
irons out
challenged
any
him.
mistakes he may have at the beginning of the season. And perhaps in 2026, George may need to watch his shoulders, given the raw speed Kimi has clearly shown. And who knows, if Kimi ends up running circles around him in the future, it could lead to George potentially leaving the team, especially with the rumours that link him with a possible move to Red Bull.
Probably not
should Max
now.
Verstappen potentially move to Aston in 2027.
Don't see that.
But that's all for the future. Right now we are in the present day, and I feel for this year, George will have the edge, but not by much.
Not by much, he had the edge by a massive amount, and arguably my second best driver of the year. He was at one point my driver of the year, but as the season has gone on, that has obviously swiftly changed, of course, and I think you'll know who that driver is, to be honest with you. Yeah, George, what a year he's had. 2 wins under his belt, was at one point the nearest challenger to McLaren at one point until Max Verstappen turned it around. Well, in some points of the year, I should say. Arguably his best year in Formula 1 now as a result. And next year I think is going to be very exciting for him, because if Mercedes do have the best car next year, then you've got to say George may be the favourite to win the title next year. Who knows really, and potentially be the 12th Brit now to win the World Championship. But in terms of the prediction, I put him in 6th. He ended up finishing 4th in the end, so I was 2 off in the end, but kind of understandable. I did think that Mercedes would be inconsistent again. They were to a degree, but not as much as they have been in previous years. Another team has kind of took over when it comes to that really. Well, I say inconsistent, just being consistently bad. But yeah, good year for George, and look forward to seeing what he can do in 26. Moving on to P5.
Position, and this one may cause a bit of controversy in the comments, because for this one, I've put Lewis Hamilton. Ooh, Lewis down in 5th in his first year with Ferrari, in a car that's potentially a title contender. Surely that's an error, right? Well, no, it isn't, and I'll explain why. Now, look, don't get it twisted. I'm not one of those people who thinks Lewis is washed. I made my opinions about that clear in my reaction video I did at the end of last year. Go check it out if you're interested, as it has my lovely face in
and
it,
again,
even though I was suffering from a cold that day.
I'm not suffering from a cold now, though.
Thing is, though,
just an itch.
Although I still think he's one of the quickest drivers on the grid, I also have to acknowledge at the same time that Lewis is not the same driver he used to be back when he was dominating with the ever-conquering Mercedes in the mid to late 2010s heading into the 2020s.
He definitely isn't
Last
now.
year was a horrible year for Lewis for many reasons, with some of that being down to him. And whilst I do think he will have a slightly better year at Ferrari, I don't think he will be to the point where he is challenging for the championship, especially given who his teammate is, and also due to McLaren
neither of them came close to challenging for the title.
As well as Max Verstappen being Max Verstappen. Now don't get me wrong, I do think Lewis will win a few races this year, but I don't think it will be as many as what many of his fans are expecting him to get. For Lewis, even though he does have an option to stay a further year, I do think the next 2 years will be make
I think
or
he's
break
kind of
for him
already made his
in terms
mind
of
up,
whether
to be
he will
honest.
continue in the sport or not, especially when a certain Oliver Behrman is waiting in the wings.
Talked
given
about that
he's highly
earlier.
tipped to be Lewis's successor should he decide to call it a day after 2026. Hopefully Lewis proves me wrong, but I have my doubts.
Yeah, those doubts came true in the end. What I was basing my prediction on was how his 2024 season went after he got those 2 wins. And it's safe to say he's got worse. Now, look, let's not beat around the bush. This year's Ferrari was a dog. An absolute dog. Most of the time was trying to figuratively kill the drivers, I suppose, with the amount of oversteer that car had. But he still had a teammate to fight against, and Leclerc ran circles around him this year. There's no getting around that. And his qualifying this year has been abysmal, as for Lewis, unlike him from previous years. Yeah, I think we even saw it this year. He doesn't look very happy, does Lewis? I mean, you saw after the Hungarian Grand Prix weekend, he was calling himself useless, which I think is a sign that maybe Lewis is now contemplating retirement. And considering that he's also said he's not looking forward to next year, especially given that it seems that Ferrari, things are not looking good for them in 2026 with their 2026 car. That made no sense. I think next year is going to be Lewis's last year, to be honest. I don't think he'll take up that option to stay on for another year. I do think next year we will be saying goodbye to Lewis Hamilton, and I think next year's British Grand Prix will be the last time that I see him on a racetrack, which is quite poetic, really, if it ends up being his last year. And I would imagine if he's going to announce it, he'll announce it before the British Grand Prix, if anything, and it would be quite poetic because the first ever Formula 1 race I went to was actually Lewis Hamilton's first British Grand Prix, 2007. So I might be there to witness his last one in 2026. Full circle moment, if you ask me. But yeah, I do feel sorry for Lewis as well, the way he's going through, but you can't beat around the fact that this year has just been an awful year for him. Some of it down to the car, but also down to him as well, especially when you look at what Charles Leclerc was able to do. If next year ends up being Lewis's last year, I hope he does go out with a bang, because I do think he deserves to have one final year to show why he is one of, if not the greatest drivers in Formula 1 history. Statistically, he is the greatest of all time. But yeah, I'm not holding my breath considering the bad reports we've heard from Ferrari. Me putting him in 5th was actually quite generous. He actually ended up finishing in 6th in the end, which is actually one off from where I predicted him, but nowhere near where I thought Ferrari would be, because I thought they'd be title contenders this year. Yeah, they were nowhere near, were they? They didn't even get a win this season. Only a couple of podiums, which came from Charles Leclerc this year. I say a couple, a few. Lewis, for the first time in his career, a podiumless season. It would be very sad if next year ends up being his final year that he doesn't get a podium with Ferrari. We'll see what happens next year, that's for sure, but I think next year will be his last, and I think Ollie Behrman will definitely be the one to replace him next year. Is there a chance Ferrari ends up having an all completely different lineup in 27? That's one to look out for. Anyway, moving on.
Moving on to P4, and in this position, I put Australia's best hope, Oscar Piastri.
Oh,
Oscar, it's safe to say, had a very good 2024 season, with him picking up his first 2 wins of his career at Hungary and Baku, even if the first
although
one was a
his
bit controversial.
latter part of the year was a bit questionable.
2025 looks to be another strong year for McLaren, with them looking like they once again have the
Oh, they
fastest
did by a
car on the
country
grid,
mile,
with
but
Ferrari like last year not being too
I
far
can't wait to
behind.
criticise
That
him,
being
and
said, though,
I can't wait for
whilst
the
I
comments
do
I'm going to
believe
make for
Oscar
both
has
Oscar and Lando
potential,
here.
and I can see him getting a few more wins this year, I don't think now is the time yet for him to be challenging for the title, and I can see him once again playing a supporting role for Lando. Oscar finished 4th in the championship last year, and I can see him finishing in that position again, which is why I played it safe and kept him in P4 for this year as well. One thing's for sure though, he does need to sort out his qualifying for this year, as a few times last year he was often making mistakes,
but
which
he's
put
always
him
been
on
a
the back
racer,
foot,
hasn't he,
and
Oscar,
saw
to
him
be
being
honest?
on the wrong sort of track positions to set a competitive time, which often saw him getting knocked out in qualifying. If McLaren are to retain their constructors' crown from last year, Oscar can't afford to make these silly errors again, as it could allow their rivals to capitalise and take
silly
points
errors for
away
something
from them,
else, Joe.
especially with how close this season could potentially be.
I said he wasn't ready for a championship fight. He clearly was, because he was in the title fight this year. Took it to the last race, but yeah. Oh God, Oscar. It started off so promising, and I literally thought for a while he was going to be the one to win the championship this year. But what happened after Zandvoort, man? It's his last win this year, by the way. madness. It definitely stems from that team order that happened at Monza, because from that point, mentally, he was all over the place, wasn't he? He crashed at Baku, both in qualifying and the race, had no pace in Singapore even after the contact with Lando Norris, had a crash in the sprint race with his teammate at Austin, was nowhere in the main race, was nowhere in Mexico, had an accident with Antonelli, which I don't blame him for, personally, but he was given a penalty for that, was nowhere in Las Vegas. The last 2 races he picked it up, but it was already too late. Yeah, for Oscar, for a while I don't think he was as bad as Lando when it came to maximising the car, because I do think both of them made a hash of it, despite the fact they had the best car this year. I think for a while Oscar was slightly better because he was the more smarter and he seemed to be more level-headed than Lando, but after what happened at Monza, that part of him just seemed to check out, and he ended up having that poor run that he had, which as a result cost him the World Championship. Yeah, what could have been for Oscar, really? He's kind of fell into the same trap that what his manager did, Mark Webber, when he let the demons get to him, really, and he ended up losing the championship like he did in 2010. For Oscar, has he got fed up with McLaren after that Monza team order? Who knows, really? Could that still be playing on his mind when we get to 2026, even if McLaren are still challenging for the title next year, which I fully expect them to be, considering they have the Mercedes engine? Who knows, really? Of course, there has been rumours that if he does leave, because he does have a release clause in his contract, he could go to Ferrari, should Charles Leclerc go to Aston Martin, which I can see happening, but it all depends really on what Charles feels about the Ferrari, and if the reports about the Ferrari are anything to go by, looks like maybe Oscar could end up going to Ferrari in 2027. But we'll wait and see, of course. That's all speculation, it's all rumours, but yeah, what a missed opportunity for Oscar Piastri, it must be said. Also, at times, didn't extract the most out of that car, but it's really the latter part of the year, which is what everybody's going to be talking about, that is for sure. On to what I thought the top 3 would be then.
And starting off with 3rd place, and I can't believe I'm saying this, but I've put the reigning champion,
so
Max
close.
Verstappen. Yep, you are not hearing or seeing things. I do generally believe that this is the year that Max's streak of titles comes to an end. And judging from his body language after day 3, which saw him have a spin, I think even he knows that this is going to be a very tough year.
It was for most of it,
now don't get me
but...
wrong, I do think Max will drag Red Bull this year, and I do think he will get a few wins. I mean, he is the best driver in the world, for God's sake. However, even with Max's godlike talents, it's hard to ignore the fact that during the second half of last year, Red Bull's car performance was declining at an alarming rate, which allowed the likes of McLaren, Ferrari and Mercedes to catch up, even to the point where McLaren and Ferrari were able to leapfrog Red Bull in the pecking order.
And Ferrari went back behind Red Bull after that.
Saw Red Bull lose the Constructors' title to McLaren, with them even finishing behind Ferrari as well. And with no Adrian Newey at the team anymore, I do believe that this decline is going to continue, especially when, if you look at pre-season
depends
testing,
how their 2026 car is, which doesn't sound good.
Corners. And I do believe that this could lead to an even bigger issue for Red Bull in the future, especially if Verstappen decides to
is a
leave
possibility
the team in
after
the future,
26.
given he does have a clause in his contract which would allow him to leave the team early before his contract is due to expire, which is in 2028. Max was lucky that his first half of the season
that clause
was so
being
strong
that if he's outside the top
that
3 in
it
the
allowed him to have a big
championship,
enough
which he
gap in the
wasn't.
standings to retain his title. However, this year, I don't think Lady Luck will be on his side this time. This means, as a result,
he was very close, very, very close to winning a 5th successive title. For Max, he's my driver of the year. Now, I know what you're thinking. He didn't win the championship. Doesn't matter. For me, what Max was able to do in that second half of the season to turn around a 104-point deficit to then get himself in the title fight in the last race of the season and only just miss out by 2 points, I think is incredible. And for me, he is my driver of the year. I came close to saying it was going to be George Russell because of what Max Verstappen did in Spain, which, by the way, what Max did in Spain was absolutely horrendous. The way that he handled that whole situation was uncalled for, and he did deserve the penalty, and that's arguably the thing that's cost him the World Championship this year. Had he just kept his head and took the 5th place, he would have won the championship this year. Just shows how costly Barcelona was in the end when you consider that both McLaren drivers were doing everything in their power to try and bottle the championship in a car that should should have been miles clear of what that Red Bull, because that Red Bull this year, around the corners especially, was an absolute dog. Even though they made improvements towards the end of the year to the point where Verstappen was able to get more wins than what he did before Monza, it still wasn't quicker than the McLaren, of course. Oscar and Lando, for me, didn't make the most of that car and were doing everything in their power to try and bottle this year's championship. They didn't in the end. Lando went on to win it, but how close were we to seeing one of the biggest bottle jobs in history? I mean, imagine them doing an Arsenal-Tottenham where they're in a title fight and they both end up losing it like they did in 2015-16 against Leicester City. Embarrassing. But for me, even though he didn't win the championship this year, Max, for me, is my driver of the year once again. Will he still be at Red Bull after 26 though? That is a question. If the car is any good and if he enjoys his regulations, then yeah, he will stay. But if not, could he move somewhere else? Could he move to Aston? Could he move to Mercedes? Could he leave Formula 1 altogether? I mean, we know he's interested in GT3 racing. I mean, at the time of recording, he's been testing a GT3 car, specifically a Mercedes. I think at the was it at the Nürburgring? I can't remember. I'll put it up on the screen somewhere. But yeah, he has been testing recently, and that could be his next career path after Formula 1. Could that come sooner rather than later? I mean, goodness me, imagine the sight if we see Max Verstappen, Lewis Hamilton, and Fernando Alonso all leave Formula 1 after next year. That is a combined 13 World Championships going off the grid if that happens. Mental. Mental, mental, mental. I predicted Max to finish in third. He finished in second. So close to getting that right. Had Oscar Piastri not been a fool at the end of the season, that prediction would have been correct. But he didn't. So I ended up being one off in the end. So thanks a lot, Oscar, for ruining that prediction. I could have ended up with 2 correct predictions, not just 1. Anyway, let's go to the top 2 then.
In P2 and drawing the short straw, I put Lando Norris. Yeah,
why did you have to be so bad, Ferrari?
I don't think it will be second time lucky for Lando.
Oh, it was.
As even though McLaren appear to have the
second
quickest car
time
on
lucky.
paper, there's one thing that's stopping me from saying Lando will win the title.
Which was?
We saw throughout last year that whenever Lando was in a position to fight for the win, 9 times out of 10, he would often let the pressure get to him, which often led to silly errors on his part, whether that was down to his race starts, his decision making whenever he was in wheel-to-wheel combat, or him even losing concentration whenever he had a dominant lead up front. I said that Lando needed to do a lot of self-reflecting during the off-season to ensure that he didn't make these mistakes again. But whether he has done that or not,
he claimed he did, but I would question that. I sit here
right now in March 2025, and I'm happy to be proven wrong on this, but I haven't seen enough evidence to suggest that he has put the demons of last year
Maybe towards the
behind
end of the year we started to finally see Lando get his head screwed on.
Yes,
but
absolutely.
For the most part,
McLaren
no.
looked to have the edge over Ferrari, judging from pre-season testing. However, even with the fastest car, do I believe it will be enough for him to win the title? No.
It was
now,
in the end,
really hope
but that was
Lando
mainly
does
because
prove
they
me
never
wrong
really
this
had
year,
any
as I
competition
really
until
do
the end
like
of the
guy.
season.
But for the most part, he does come across as a very likeable guy.
Yeah,
however, as
I
I've
still
mentioned
maintain
Nico
that,
Hirvonen during
even
his
though there have been signs where he has
2019
shown a bit of
WRC,
arrogance.
Being the nice guy
But I
doesn't
do
win
think
you
he is a nice
titles,
guy outside
and
the
you
track.
need to have a killer bastard in you to get the job
I think
done.
he finally showed
But
that towards
as
the end
of
of the year,
now,
to be fair.
and I hope he proves me wrong on this, I haven't seen enough evidence to suggest that, and I do fear he could end up doing what Sebastian Vettel did in 2018 and let the pressure get to him.
He nearly did.
Hopefully I'm
he
wrong
nearly
on
did.
that, but I'm not holding my breath.
Right, Lando. So I got that one wrong. I didn't think he would win the championship. He did. So congratulations, Lando, for proving me wrong on that one. And he does deserve the championship. I have to give him credit there. Whether we think of him as a strong or weak champion, he did deserve the championship. He had the best car, and he absolutely deserved it. That being said, is he my driver of the year? No. I don't think he even gets in my top 3. Probably P4, just outside, but he doesn't get in my top 3 for me. The reason being, even though he's won the championship this year, he really made life hard for himself this year. Let's talk about the beginning of the season where he was doing everything in his power to keep dropping points to Piastri. China, he mucked up his qualifying, both sprint and main qualifying. Left the door open for fresh air in the sprint race to the point where he went onto the gravel and lost a couple of places. Only gaining 1, I think, in the end from Lance Stroll because it was tough to overtake there. Had to make his comeback through the main race, which he did do, got up to second, but he nearly blew it away by ignoring what his team were requesting, which was to preserve the brakes. He didn't do that. He was trying to catch up to Piastri, and his brakes race completely weird to the point where he had to nurse the car to the end, to the point where he nearly lost the place to George Russell. Japan, I think both Lando and Oscar didn't make the most of it. They allowed Max Verstappen to get pole. Bahrain mucked up his qualifying and then made a complete dog's dinner in trying to overtake people. Made life hard for himself. He did eventually get past a few, but was making it hard for himself, and even to the point where he didn't even pass an inferior George Russell. He had technical issues with his car. Jeddah, he crashed in qualifying, had to make his way through the field again, was making a dog's dinner of overtaking, particularly Lewis Hamilton when he forgot where the DRS detection was, twice I believe, and he ended up missing out on the podium, losing out to Charles Leclerc in a crap Ferrari. I could keep going on, but there were many times during this year where Lando was doing everything in his power to try and bottle it, and I did feel a lot of the time, like with Oscar this year, he wasn't making the most of the machinery he had, because that McLaren was insane this year, and Lando and Oscar, I don't think for the most part, were making the most of that machine they had. Now, Lando did win the championship, we've got to give him credit, but I do think he is one of the weaker champions that we've had. I don't think he's the weakest. I think you've got the likes of Mike Hawthorne, Keke Rosberg, Phil Hill, who are probably weaker. So I don't think he's the weakest, but I think he's on the weak end of world champions if we were going to rank every world champion on a tier list. I think I'd put him level with Damon Hill, because like with Damon, there were many times where, yes, whilst they're very fast drivers, they were doing everything in their power to try and bottle the championship. In the case of Damon Hill in 1996, he should have had that championship wrapped up in Monza, but was doing everything in his power to bottle it to Jacques Villeneuve, his only rival that year, who was a rookie, let's not forget. Lando does deserve it, and I have to give him credit, but I don't think he was the best driver this year, not even in the top 3. But there are signs that I think maybe he's now started to turn a corner. I mentioned towards the end of the year, he seemed to have got his head screwed on and was putting in dominant performances in both Mexico and Brazil, crucial performances that would allow him to win the championship. And then from that point, he basically just took it easy in the last few races. Obviously, he nearly lost it because of that double disqualification in Las Vegas. It would have been the championship in Qatar if it wasn't for that excessive plank wedge. But either way, he did a good job, and I hope that now he's won a world championship. Now that that pressure has now been lifted off him, we can now see the Lando Norris that we know he's capable of. I mean, he's got one of the most impressive junior careers, for goodness sake. Hopefully now he's world champion, we finally start to see the Lando Norris that we know he's capable of, where he's got no pressure on him, he can handle the pressure pretty well, and he's able to knuckle down, get his head screwed on, and he's actually able to take a fight to the championship next year, especially if Mercedes are going to be challenging McLaren next year. We'll wait and see on that, but yeah, Lando proved me wrong. I didn't think he'd win the championship, he did, but that prediction is not as bad as the one that's coming up right now.
In P1, if it wasn't already obvious, I've gone with Charles Leclerc. Yep, I honestly believe that this is the year where Ferrari will end their driver's title now, with Charles Leclerc
clown
finally
department
grabbing his
once
first
again.
title.
Back to the clown
Although McLaren,
department.
judging from testing, have a quicker car than Ferrari, I do believe the driver in the end will make the difference, as when comparing both Charles and Lando together, Charles for me just has that little bit more compared to Lando.
And I do believe he still does.
Charles has come off the back.
That's why Charles, in my
arguably
opinion,
his
is
best
in
year
my top
F1,
3 when it comes to
with
drivers
many,
this
including
year.
myself,
Probably third best
believing
behind
that he
George
is a
and
close
Max.
second to Max Verstappen, and this will give Charles possibly the best opportunity to step up to the plate and potentially capture his first world title, which I believe he will grab with both hands, providing Ferrari don't do a Ferrari again.
They did do a Ferrari,
Charles,
J-Dub.
in my mind, will beat Lewis in the standings simply because he's been at Ferrari longer than Lewis has, and also the fact that, in my opinion, I do believe he is now a better driver than Lewis,
by a country
which is
mile.
why
He
I am
proved it
still
this
very
year.
sceptical about Lewis's decision to move to Ferrari. Now, I'm not
Yeah, I
expecting
think a
Charles
lot of
to
people are
dominate
now
the
saying that he
championship,
shouldn't have left
as I do
Mercedes.
believe Lando and maybe Max will give him
But
a
would
run
he
for his
would,
money.
would this
But
decline
in
would
the
have
end, when
would
the
this
clock
decline have
stopped,
happened at
I
Mercedes as
think
well?
everything will
Potentially.
fall
Look
into
at what
place for
happened in
Charles,
24.
and I do believe in the end he will end up becoming the first Monegasque to win the title. Watch his prediction go down the drain.
Oh, it did. Oh my god. Me and the Moaning Yorkshireman have got pie on our face because we both predicted that Charles Leclerc would win the title this year. Their car was awful. No wins, and only a few podiums for Charles Leclerc this year. Nowhere near challenging for the title. He finished 5th in the championship, 4 off. I've basically done what I did. I did a Premier League prediction on a Discord chat that I did where I predicted Liverpool would finish 5th last season when they won the Premier League. I've done the same thing. Oh, poor Charles. But for me, he is still my top 3 driver this year because the performances he did do in that crap box of a Ferrari, to the point where he was able to finish on the podium a few times. He finished in Jeddah, just holding off Lando. He got a podium in Monaco, which was kind of easy to do because that's more about skill, not power, and also hard to overtake there. Spain, he deserved that one as well. Worked his arse off to get that podium. Got the strategy right with the safety car. Got a podium in Austria. Deserved that one. Ferrari actually had some decent pace that weekend, to be fair. He got a podium in COTA. Only just missing out on second to Lando Norris, and then got a podium in Mexico. Probably should have been third had we not had that safety car, that virtual safety car towards the end due to Carlos Sainz's car hanging out a little bit in the stadium section. But he still got the podium regardless, though. But yeah, apart from the fact that Ferrari was crap, I think it's still been a good year for Charles. Not as good as last year. Last year is still his best year to date, but for me, he's still the second best driver on the grid. And if he had a McLaren at his disposal, he would have walked this championship, in my opinion. Same with George and Max, to be honest. If they were in that McLaren, I think they would have walked it. I am in that camp that believes that, because again, I do believe Lando and Oscar, whilst Lando deserves to win the championship, to his credit, and whilst I don't think Lando and Oscar are bad drivers, I don't think they're at the level yet where they can be considered world class like Max, George and Charles are at the moment at world class level. But yeah, 4 off for Charles, and I look like a right muppet. The score is up on your screen now. I've lost complete count. It's definitely worse than last year's, that's for sure. Let's quickly go through the constructors' predictions and then the driver predictions as well. It's on your screen now for you to take a look at. Let's see then. So I predicted Sauber to finish 10th. They ended up finishing 9th in the end. Aston Martin finished 9th. They came close to, but they didn't. I think they finished 7th in the end. They were 7th, so I was 2 off with that one. Racing Bulls, I predicted 8th. They finished 6th in the end. 7th, I put Williams. They finished 5th. They finished best of the rest. Alpine, I predicted them to finish 6th. They finished 10th. They finished last. That was a bad one. Haas, I predicted them to finish 5th. This is also a bad one. They finished 8th in the end, so 3 off. 4th, I put Mercedes. They finished 2nd. 3rd, I put Red Bull. I was correct on that. The one-man Red Bull team ended up beating Ferrari in the end. How embarrassing. Speaking of which, I put Ferrari in 2nd. They finished 4th. And in P1, I got this correct. I predicted McLaren to retain their constructors, and they did. So that's good. So in total, I've actually got 2 correct, like I did last season. I got McLaren and Red Bull correct in the constructor standings. Let's quickly go through the driver transfers then. Now, at the time when I posted this, the Mercedes seats were still yet to be determined. The second Red Bull seat was still yet to be confirmed, as were the 2 Racing Bull seats, as was the second Alpine seats, and as were the 2 Cadillac seats. And in total, I got 7 out of 8 correct. I got the 2 Cadillac seats correct in Bottas and Perez. I got the 2 Racing Bull seats correct in Lawson and Lindblad. I got Hadjar correct for Red Bull. I got the Mercedes correct as well with Russell and Antonelli. But the one I didn't get right was the second Alpine seat, because I honestly thought that Paul Aaron, because of how cruel Alpine have been with their second drivers, because it felt like they were doing this for a while with Colapinto, I thought they were going to do the same with Colapinto and were actually going to put Paul Aaron alongside Pierre Gasly. That's not going to happen because Franco Colapinto is staying at the team next year. But anyway, that is my predictions then done for 2026, of course. For 2025, sorry. Done, of course. That's next year, of course. Can't wait to do them again for 2026, where I'll probably get it horribly wrong, especially considering that we've got new regulations. So it might spice up the order a little bit as a result. But I'm definitely looking forward to it. Now we've got 22 cars again, which is great to see. But that's that, really. I'm looking forward to doing it for 2026, and I'm definitely looking forward to do the predictions for the 2027 driver lineup, because it is expected that could be the most chaotic in a very long time. But that has been it for the 2025 reaction anyway. But if you think that this is the last video from me from 2025, you'd be wrong, because this is not my last video for 2025, because I've got one more video left to come before the year draws to a close, and that video will come out on Christmas Day at 7 PM GMT. Now, I'm not going to tell you what that video is. The only clue I'm going to give you is, if you've been watching my videos on any of my older channels, specifically the one that's been renamed to JW Does League Racing when I rebranded that for League Racing content, I obviously stopped uploading on there because I just didn't have time to make those videos anymore. But I did a video on there a few years ago, and I'm remaking that video for this channel, but expanded. That's all I'm going to say. That's the only clue I'm going to give you. You'll just have to wait until Christmas Day to find out what that video exactly is. But until then, that has been it then, guys. I hope you have enjoyed it. So thank you all for watching. I've been JW Talks Motorsport. Happy Christmas, and I'll see you on the 25th of December for that special video. Till then, take care.